Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming to our session today. And my name is Angie Allen, and our colleagues are going to introduce ourselves. And we're going to talk about our research and program development that we've done with African American entrepreneurs in Wisconsin, and how they've been navigating barriers to accessing startup capital. And before we get started, what we'd like you to do is, if you're familiar, if you could, in the chat, maybe let us know next to your name where you're from, or rename your profile picture. That would be really great. So we can just get a feel as a team for who's here with us. And Diana, if you want to go for it, that's awesome. Today, we're going to introduce ourselves, and like I said, and we'll have this on the next slide too, we want to get to know a little bit about you, and we'll start by sharing our framework, the conceptual framework that we used for our research, our method, where we're at currently with our results, the impact that we've had, some of our next steps, and then we'll take some time to have breakout rooms to talk a little bit about what you've learned and what you've heard, and how it applies to you. And then we'll wrap up with some questions and answers, and that's our session today. Oh, that's great. So just by way of getting to know us a little bit, this is who we are, and our full research team from the University of Wisconsin-Madison that's involved in this research and the programming that's coming from it. Somehow muted myself. Okay, I am unmuted now. But I'm Angie Allen. I am in Milwaukee County, and in a community development educator and associate professor there. And Rajan, would you like to say hi to everybody? Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rajan Paul. I'm currently an MSW student at UW, and the RA for the Black Business Owners Research.
Diana, feel free to say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Hammer, a UW-Madison Extension Community Development Educator. And Joseph, you're up.
Yes, hi. This is Joseph Malwal. I'm with the University of Illinois Extension. Prior to that, I was in Wisconsin, Community and Economic Development Specialist here in Illinois.
And we miss him, but we're so glad he can be with us here today.
Yes. And so other folks who are on our team who are not with us today, but we wanted to let you know, Christian Smeeder is our statewide specialist in qualitative research. And then we'll introduce you a little bit through the course of our presentation to our two lead community partners, Tracy Robertson, who is in the northeastern Wisconsin area, and Dasha Kelly Hamilton, who's in the Milwaukee area. So again, if you're just joining us, welcome. And we'd like to get to know a little bit about you if you rename your profile picture at the end of your name with your state, where you're from, and let us know in the chat what's your connection to this topic that brings you here today. So with that, I'll transition to Diana. And by the way, Diana and Joseph originated this research with Rajan, and so we're going to walk you through a little bit of that process, and how this program is expanded to Milwaukee. So I'll transition to Diana, and we'll continue to introduce the partnership and the program from there.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. So in case you're not familiar with the counties in Wisconsin, this is a list of the ones that have the largest Black population. And this is significant. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Milwaukee County and the Racine-Kenosha area, southeast part of the state bordering Illinois, high Black population since the 50s roughly. But the arrows are pointing to Brown, Winnebago, and Outagamie counties, which are in the northeast part of the state. So if you're in Milwaukee heading straight north, and then a little bit to the west, you'll come to the Fox Valley area, and then eventually to Green Bay where Rejan's from, Brown County. So Brown, Winnebago, and Outagamie are also on the top 10 list for growing Black populations in the state, although little attention has been given to the populations in that part of the state, since normally you think of the more urban areas. So this is why we started thinking about what Black business ownership looks like in the more rural or less metro areas. And then just another picture of the state and how it's changing. If you haven't looked at this fact for your state or area, do, because I bet it's very similar. So on the left, we have the Wisconsin population in 2019 who was age 65 and older by race. And on the right, it's basically kids age birth to 9 by race. So you see, like, within a generation, from grandparents to grandchildren, the racial and ethnic diversity is tremendously different. And if you think about even your families, I know in my family this is true. So the adults and the retirees in Wisconsin are looking very different culturally and visibly from the newest business owners, future workers, future CEOs. And if our state is going to thrive, especially in the rural areas, we need to understand who those folks are and how we can best work with them to make sure that they are successful growing the businesses that we have in our communities locally. So this is another key fact to use. Also interesting, go to your local school district and look at the K through 12 race and ethnicity count. That's always fun too. And then just in general in Wisconsin, businesses owned by people of color are increasing everywhere. Here you see by all the different racial and ethnic groups. So we know there is a lot of entrepreneurship happening, but we don't have a good understanding of how it was being done, what the barriers are, what the successes are, and that's what led to doing this project. Back to you, Angie.
There we go. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about our conceptual and theoretical frameworks that have contributed to this research. And I'm going to start by talking about participatory action research. And Joseph is going to talk about the community capitals framework. We can go to the next. So this is a summary of the participatory action research framework that myself and our colleague, Randy Stoker, who's in rural sociology and is a well-known scholar by many of us in community-based research in higher education, put together. And it's very to the point about the PAR framework. And if you're not familiar with participatory action research or PAR, this is a good introduction to it. So essentially, it's focusing on engaging the constituency-led group, which means it could be a community member or those folks that we partner with who have been underrepresented in our programming or also in activities and other areas that we're looking to involve in our relationship between our programming and research. So basically allowing them to lead the action and research process where we are facilitators, which is largely what historically Extension has done best. But in many ways, as we specialize in different areas, we need to return to and uplift in several ways. So this is a great way to be able to do that. And the action is really focusing those constituency-led groups on being the ones who define what is happening. So it's their goal and their decisions around what strategies mean that define the action in which they are participating. So therefore, the research is working together with them to identify what is it that they need to know and how is it that we're working together with them to support them to carry out those actions through the research process. So we're applying those strategies to meet those knowledge gaps and directly connect them to the process of what's happening. And together, we're building not just traditional research, but applied and engaged research that's useful and beneficial to them. We can go, yeah. And I'll turn it over to Joseph to introduce the community capitals framework.
All right, thank you, Angie. along with consistent to what Angie was saying about the participatory research, we thought about a conceptual framework that would fit that approach. And entrepreneurship in general as that economic orientation that is always focusing on human capital, financial capital, and to some extent social capital. But the other capitals that are very crucial in any community development are not necessarily included. And so as the community and economic development educators, we want to look at this from really a very holistic perspective to see all the elements in the community that can influence any development of business, especially with focus on people of color. And so we thought that this framework would be more holistic and identify all the factors that may be important for us to be able to provide a better education in our work. And so I'm sure most of you are familiar with this framework developed by Flora's, Cornelia and Jean Flora at Iowa State University and also Kansas State. And this framework is really an integrated system that look at any development from a system perspective. And so you can see in the middle is what community want to do or individual or group of people would like to achieve with their capitals. That is the assets that are required for any social functioning, whether it is economic, social, health, or environmental. We need all those seven type of capitals. And so it's a very neat thing to look at this, given the complexity and the history behind that. And so I'm going to be, can you move forward just to provide some kind of next. Those are just definition, they are always situational. You could come up with your own definition based on your condition. As you saw that diagram, the center could be anything you want to put in there. And then you will go around and try to focus all the assets to achieve that goal, making sure that their interaction is consistent with your goal. And so natural capital would be something like land. What is the function of land in the community? And we will have access to the land, the park, the water, the wildlife, the natural beauty, who is really enjoying that, whether it's fishing or something like that in the community. We have access and we have not. Cultural capital is, again, the way that we are framed culturally to look at the world and the way we act in the world. It can be negative too, and by the way, capital, according to Flores, is anything that can produce another thing. That's the definition of a capital. So when we talk about cultural capital, we're talking about an asset that has the potential to produce another capital through the interaction. And so in a community or group, there are voices that are much stronger that the culture internalized to be the leading voices in that community, and they do have influence. And that shape also how community develop and nurture their innovation and creativity. Human capital is obvious. We know that all the time. So it's a big economic element that is very pervasive and economic. Social capital, very crucial. Also is that relationship that we use to leverage resources. And there are two different types of social capital, the bonding social capital, and the bonding and the bridging social capital. Bonding social capital is the type of relationship that is maintained within a group of people with similar characteristics, whether they are ethnic or educational background or gender. That particular group kind of keep that capital for their own cohesion, but it can also be exclusive. In other words, it may also keep other people away from enjoying community resources. Bridging is any relationship that is more loose, loose relationship that is tied people with different cultural background or educational background, different interests. And we'll talk about that later in our in the general finding. Political capital, yes, access to power. Do you have access to power? Can you influence any institutional decision making and all that? Financial capital, of course, we know what it is. Build capital, the infrastructure that support the entire economics and social system. So we carefully frame this so that we can look at this demographic within the lens of community social capital, so that we see what the interaction of the capital and what do they produce, what is missing, what is lacking, and all that. I think I'm going to throw it to Rejan. And if you have any question later on, you can put it on the chat box and we can pursue.
Yeah, so actually I think I'm first, Rejan, which you're next. You're on deck.
Sorry.
So we want to start the story with Tracy Robertson, who is shown here in this beautiful picture. She had started a racial literacy nonprofit in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. You can find that once a year. It has the busiest airport in the world, home to EAA, many other notable things about Oshkosh, but it's not noted for having a large or well-known Black population, or really many people of color at all. But she started a racial literacy organization here, which was a very brave thing to do for the context of the community. And as in the work of doing this, realized she was one of only a few Black founding directors of nonprofits, or really even of other Black business owners. She just didn't have too much of a peer group. So because forming a nonprofit isn't enough work on its own, she also set up her own networking group, which came to be known as the Regional People of Color Business Association. I had started volunteering with her in my personal life just to learn more about racial literacy. And then when she formed this group, I realized, ooh, I can call this work, and start doing extension work with the business association. And from there, we realized it would be really excellent to have a better understanding of who are the other Black business owners in this part of the state. There's a 4-county area known as the Fox Valley that goes between Fond du Lac, where I am, and Green Bay to the northeast. And Tracy was told there aren't any other Black business owners. Like when she would ask, like, what are you doing specifically for economic development for the Black community? Meh, there's really not anybody else. So that was problematic. And we wanted to, the goals of the study were to, in some ways, take a census, although we chose to do it through qualitative methods because we wanted to have relationships with people too. We wanted to start to understand what was going on for folks, what was working well, what wasn't at all. Did they know each other? Were they working together? I know I didn't know very many Black business owners. As a white university educator working for a predominantly white institution, that's not someone I'm gonna be interacting with a whole lot, where, frankly, people aren't seeking me out either. So I knew I wasn't a part of that scene, but I knew Extension should be. There was a lot of good work to be done. So we put together a proposal with Joseph, and we're funded by our dean to hire a research assistant to do up to 50 interviews with Black business owners in the northeast part of the state. And it was really an advantage to not use the university hiring process. You may be familiar with how university hiring processes work. Bachelor's required, master's preferred, send in a resume, send in 1,000 references. It's very onerous. And if you're not already in the swing of that kind of process, you're not going to apply. It's frankly off-putting for people to do that. And so because we had this grant, we were able to essentially subcontract with Fit Oshkosh. So Tracy could be the boss. The position that we created was a Fit Oshkosh position. And then we both advertised through our own channels for it. And Tracy and I were the hiring team then. And it was a really lovely day when we got to interview Rejan Hall. So now you can tell us your role, Rejan.
Definitely. And the things that Diana has just mentioned definitely talks about a little bit of what I'll be getting into today. But I wanted just to talk from day one, my experiences from how we started and how we got to where we are now. Just giving a little backtrack, my name is Rejan Hall. I'm currently a master's student at UW-Madison, studying to get my MSW. But I went to undergrad at UW-Oshkosh. And, going to school at UW Oshkosh is specifically a Black male going to a PWI, a predominantly white institution. Meeting other aspiring Black entrepreneurs was tough. I've always known that I have a passion for self-employment, owning a business, financial freedom, but I don't believe at the time I fully understood the challenges, obstacles, and hurdles I would face and have to jump through, just to get a slight bit of a chance to build my business up and be successful. Luckily, my senior year at UWO, which Diana mentioned, over the years, I've built a relationship with our assistant vice chancellor, Dr. Sylvia Carey Butler, who's also our director of diversity and inclusion. I connected with, because of that, I was able to connect with Fit Oshkosh and with Tracy Robertson, which they were hiring, a research assistant to run a project interviewing Black business owners in Northeastern Wisconsin, which you've heard. The goal was to hire someone, in my opinion, from what we've talked about, someone from the target community, because research shows that it's almost vital in completing, such a culturally specific project. As a member of the community and an aspiring entrepreneur, becoming the research assistant for a project with that type of significance it's been motivating, it's been inspirational, and it's helped shine a light on the importance of African-American business ownership in communities. To get the job, applicants had to answer 2 questions really, and make a video of it. And the questions were, why would Black business owners trust you with their stories, as you can see on the bottom of our slide here? And the next one was, how will you get them to trust you? And at that time, me, no research experience at all, but I believe my response was, because of my own aspirations and goals in entrepreneurship, I would take that opportunity as a privilege. And, a privilege it was. I got the job. And over the first 3 months, I had the privilege, I continue to say, of interviewing 48 Black business owners, learning their experiences, networking techniques, community involvement, family connections regarding business, connections with other entrepreneurs within, their area. It even extended out, and then financial hardships or even success. I was motivated to interview as many owners as possible. I would meet at libraries, places of business, outside in parks, on your front porch, places of residence, and etc. Just different places as people can, as you may think of, to get, the research and the information that we were, looking to gather there. Creating that space of inclusivity and mutual relationships and respect and interactions regarding their experiences was super important, not just sitting there and listening, but actually interacting and reflecting what was being said, and, letting each participant understand that, I think, the reason why me being from this community, I understand to another level what's being talked about and what's needed. But at the same time, me being so young, it also helped me kind of understand the bigger aspect, because I wasn't in that position right away. But I thought that was super important. And throughout my experiences, I slowly began to recognize how much of a privilege it was to be in a space with so many dynamic entrepreneurs and business owners. The amount of information gained personally has helped me further my knowledge regarding my future aspirations. I'm currently a young Black entrepreneur practicing real estate in that same exact community. And just the opportunity itself has changed the perspectives of mine that have been embedded from a place of poverty within my own household growing up. As a 25-year-old entrepreneur, the amount of knowledge gained has delivered endless opportunities. I'm in grad school, in my opinion, because of it, and some other stuff, obviously. But has, delivered opportunities and prepared me for what's to come. I hope this research project sheds more light on the barriers and challenges Black people face when starting businesses and becoming entrepreneurs, and help support future access to more reliable startup capital that, Black entrepreneurs and business owners in our communities need.
So just to reiterate again, we started this effort to find just a whole range of things. We wanted to know from people all of the things listed here, but then specifically from a race equity lens. So one of the questions Rajan asked was, what is it like to be a Black business owner in a predominantly white area? Because we know that's different from what happens in other places of the US and in the state. So it was a lengthy interview. I think you said, could you sit down with me for a half hour? Minimum. And then most people chose to talk with him much longer about everything. It was really, really great. And Rajan was asking for permission to audio record, and then the rest of us were able to listen to those recordings later on. So it's like being a fly on the wall in a really sacred conversation. Honestly, it was beautiful. We could also give Rajan feedback on how he was doing with the qualitative interview skills that Joseph had taught him. He didn't need much after he got going. He really got into a rhythm and memorized it, I think. But that was handy initially when we were all getting to know each other and figuring out what worked, what didn't, what questions seemed to resonate with people, which others didn't. And then Tracy's question always came down to, what does meaningful support look like? We know we're not getting it right now from local economic development corporations, which there are an incredible number of. The state and this region of the state has so many different, in my county alone, there are 16 organizations doing some form of business development, but none of them are doing it specifically with Black business owners or really any other racial or ethnic group, which means their clientele ends up being, and I presume, mostly middle-class white educated business owners. And so, we know what meaningful support looks like for that audience, but we have a suspicion it's different for the Black business owners around us, and what would that be? And then our goal was to do things like this, eventually talk to national audiences and inform. In Wisconsin, it's a mostly white economic development practitioner world, other extension educators, researchers, policymakers, etc. And then scholastically speaking, this was important too, because there has been almost no research on Black business ownership in Wisconsin really at all, even about Milwaukee. The two studies that we found were focused in that area, but one was about lending in certain zip codes, and the other was also a qualitative study that focused on Milwaukee, but really that was it. So high time to learn what was going on. So Rajan and Joseph can take the lead walking us through the results here.
Yeah, and I want just to mention a little bit about, I'm very excited about Rajan's work than himself, because he came in, coming directly from his undergraduates and then walking him through a very high qualitative research approach in 3 hours. And being able to just do that and actually learn, become more creative to extract more information from the people because of the trust that he built with them was so amazing. So we could have another sitting and talk about Rajan's experience. Very, very impressive. And also because of him, of that trust, we were able to record. It's not easy to record a minority population when you do have interview with them, but they were willing to actually have their voice recorded so that the research group could actually hear their voice in addition to the transcript that we had. So that is very powerful, just to absorb that information from the people's voice into your system. So powerful. So Rajan, do you want to?
Yeah, definitely, Joseph. And thank you for that, those kind words. So we asked the question specifically about motivations and why did you start this business? From the beginning, from wherever you have been experiencing prior to you starting your business, what helped you and not forced you, but gave you the willpower to start a business. And people said to create a legacy for my kids, as I'm reading down the line, to pass wealth on to the future generation, to benefit the community, the Black community in particular, to be a role model for my kids and others who see me, to have independence, to have my own decisions, to make my own decisions, to have more flexibility than I could in a 9-to-5 regular, to work hard for myself, to obtain satisfactory employment and influenced by my parents and other relatives. The motivations to start a business for each participant focuses on, primarily community development, generational wealth, financial freedom, creating legacies that can be passed down from generations to come, and becoming the first generation business owner and changing the narrative. For lifetimes, business owners have had to fight challenges of racism, prejudice, and business satisfactory to other cultures. The challenge is beginning the mission. The challenge is beginning the mission. All the little things about business, most marginalized and low-income families are not taught, that which they cannot teach the youth or their children. The motivations speak to continued education regarding the proper steps that need to be taken surrounding business ownership. Every participant who said they had a reliable mentor throughout the process spoke about more success early on compared to others who took more the trial and tribulation approach.
So what is very interesting about the motivation is that when we look at the African-American entrepreneurs, it was mostly cultural. The motivation is to address a lot of historical issues related to economic empowerment, being able to fit and function. Is really trying to address very, very serious historical issues. And so we're very surprised that nobody talk about even economic, making money and buying this, but the idea is to actually model for my kid, for the African American in general. It very, very interesting. Next one. Okay, so we were looking for, the whole idea is to look at the access to resources, and the resources were framed from the community capital framework. The resources are not necessarily financial, but also political, cultural, build capital, all the capital that are necessary for anybody, all of us to function and do what we need to do in our community. And so we look at where do you get your money? How do you start this business? Startup is a big problem for many people, in particular, African American. And so the startup capital, majority of the people that we talk with, they just use their own money. They're saving, working 2 jobs, finding some ways, and anything that they can find and manage to be able to start their business because of the drive that you see from their motivation. So it's a lot of sacrifice to do this. In addition, and that is in addition to their businesses. In-kind support is very important, especially in the I'm going to use minority here, but the BIPOC communities, because of lack of resources. Sometimes people tend to look for help from either immediate family or friends, or even within the ethnic or racial group to be able to start their businesses. But very few, given the population, is really mostly as nothing, it's very difficult to go to a friend to lend you some, $5,000 or something like that, because they may be struggling themselves. So everything was mostly from the people themselves and nothing really from their friends. And I see, Michael with the Latino there. There is a comparison of, African American and an immigrant and other ethnic group. Other ethnic group they have their mechanism, especially bonding social capital is somehow very strong. Then they manage to either buy from their ethnic because they provide that cultural products, or because of that build bonding social capital. And even that they cannot expand because it's really enough for you to get by and not to actually to flourish. Only one person you can see, was able to maybe liberate some money from, a family inheritance. And lending is very problematic. Going to bank and other financial institutions for people of color in general is very difficult because of a variety of reasons. There's a big research on that because of discrimination and biases, institutional biases. So they face the same issue, similar issue that other minority group are facing, but that's something unique about this. Dan, I want to move forward.
I was gonna jump in here.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Just speaking on the access to resources and how the participants, were saying, okay, this is how we financed our business. The top 2 participants spoke about financing their business startup and stemmed from their own hard work and dedication to their craft, working numerous other jobs to fund their dreams of ownership. And research shows that historically white Americans with college degrees are on average 3 times as wealthy as Black Americans with the same credentials. And over the recent years, we've seen a change in the amount of support Black people receive with from their counterparts, but financially the struggle still exists. And I think I've heard that a lot from the participants is we hear a lot of, we can do this or this will be done. But like I said, the struggle still exists and will continue to exist until organizations that claim to support marginalized communities create effective programs for specifically Black members.
And we talk a lot about human capital and financial capital. And I think it's very important to note that this population, this participant group, highly educated, actually above the average of the US educational level. And so we're talking about people who are very, very highly functioning and educated, but they still facing a variety of problems. Yep. So we 13 people, we have our questionnaire, we could show here, but when we look at the loans, have you ever tried to apply for a loan? Yes, 13 people say, yeah, we did. And only 4 out of the 13 received the loan they applied for, and that loan was not even enough to cover what they need. Again, related to that bias. 2 got from a community organization, those are grant-based that are very, small and unsustainable too. If you talk about financial access, you should not be relying on grant, which is why we'll be talking about, what community capital framework says about all this. You want to be able to function yourself and being able to leverage all this without any support because it's not sustainable for you. And why should you be supported too if others are not? So we asked them, what are the reasons, what did the bank say to you? Insufficiency of credit history, you don't have a credit history, you don't have a house or anything like that that we could, take if you don't pay our loan. Sometimes the businesses that they are developing are very cultural and the banks are not used to that kind of business. And they would say, I don't think this business would work. It doesn't make sense. And so that was another way of rejection. And then the perception of discrimination was very pervasive. Every person that we talked with had indicated or somehow hint that there was a discrimination. And in fact, that discrimination prevented a lot of them to actually apply for loan. They just assumed that there's no need to go and apply. So when we talk about, self-rationing in lending, people they try like 5-6 times, or their friend or mom, dad try 5-6 times, and they just give up. And they say, you're never going to get anything. So why do you bother? Regardless of the brilliant ideas and things that they have in their mind to implement. I'm going also to invite Diana and Angie, if you have anything that you want to add, is something that we have done together. So you can move forward.
Rajan, did you want to add anything here?
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking, because I 100% speak for the people that I've been able to, or the participants that I've been able to sit in front of and talk to. And when I see this question, I've asked it specifically, I think now 90 or 80 to 90 times to participants. And the main thing that a lot of people say, to just put it all together, is there are a few economic development organizations that specifically support African American business ownership, which Joseph was just saying. The organizations that do typically don't invite African American community members to the table when creating those programs. So the gap here is that a lot of organizations, not even specifically banks or credit unions, but a lot of organizations just in general, are creating programs for communities that no one from that community is there to speak about. So I guess there's just a huge gap in between that and research. And the gap that we need to continue to focus on when creating programs that specifically look to support the communities, bringing members from that community in to help understand what exactly is needed is a must.
Next slide. Yep, I mentioned about that. So we have a lot of quotation. We are very lucky to be able to tape this research, and as you can see, financial institutions are not going to give you a loan, especially if you are Black. You can go to them with an old business plan, and they won't give you anything. It is hard to go through a bank being a first-time Black business owner and Black. You have to have some credibility and get anything done. I guess you can have reference, but with my luck in the past, I didn't have that much of luck and luck to get loan for even just a car. So we have a lot of this in the paper that we are writing to really show how they feel, how these entrepreneurs feel about their situation. You want to move forward?
Yeah, Rajan, did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, historically, banks and financial institutions, I'm kind of just reflecting what Joseph is saying, but are not the safe route per se. There are many stigmas surrounding and creating bank accounts in the Black community. The minute someone Black steps into a bank, the feeling of rejection and denial exists. And what that happens is because the historical amount of times happened in the past. Hopefully the research from today provides a better understanding of how we can bridge that gap for that feeling to not exist longer.
You can see the intersection of all the the gender, the being a neo business person, and being African American. So those three things together are making it difficult. Are complicating factors in this. Next slide. Okay. So we look at the community environment as from the community capital framework perspective. We are looking at the entire, how, what is, we took really a very sociological approach to this to see at how does the community environment affect this, the development of business among African American. So the challenging, what their issues, as a community members, people talk a lot about being isolated, being lonely. Entrepreneurship thrive in an environment where there is a lot of social connection, especially with other entrepreneurs, so that you can access timely information, critical timely information that you trust, so that you can act and make decisions about your businesses. But that connection was missing. And so the people say they were lonely, socially and also business-wise in terms of access to resources. You can see the quote there, I'm a Black man in a white man's world. Okay. So it's standing out, just being conscious about your environment everywhere you go was very dominant themes, whether it is people perception because of the cultural dimensions or experience, or because of, or real experience in the environment. The trust is missing. The main social capital part was missing in this. Moving forward.
For the community environment section, I hear this, like I said, I've said this exact question a bunch of times too. And just to keep it the shortest possible, every time this question has been asked, the first initial sound that you hear is, it's like a deep breath, because I feel like that's a question that that has not been asked before. And it's probably one of the biggest questions we have on our list. I hear a lot of the times the reflection was that this is specifically to our Northeastern Wisconsin participants, because when we talk further later on about our Milwaukee, it's a much different experience. The challenges our participants experience in Northeastern Wisconsin are not much different than Milwaukee, but what I can say is the amount of support expressed and available to the Northeastern participants compared to our Milwaukee group is very minimum. It could be hard owning a Black-owned business in an area where the next business, where the owner looks like you and can relate to your experiences, is more than a couple miles away or does not exist at all.
So oh, go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, I just want to summarize this from the community capital framework. When we look at the entire operation of these entrepreneurs from the community capital framework, we found that the entrepreneurs are very low, or almost, almost nothing from that perspective. So that the financial capital very low, the social capital is very low, and that is really very important to think about. That the social capital, the two of them, the bridging and bonding, weren't there, and so because of the nature of the settlement, that the Black business owner they don't know one another because they are very spread out, and so there's no support, there's no exchange of information from their own group. At the same time, they are not linked with the other entrepreneurs around the area, white and different entrepreneurs, so that they can learn about what is going on, how to, get some advice and where to go. At the same time, linking social capital is one of the capital we didn't talk about here, but this is the type of social capital that people use to actually be able to navigate and link and interact and influence institutions. And so none of this group was involved in any decision-making, in the economic development discussion. Other places they try to go, chambers of commerce, they try to go there. It didn't work out. They just pull out because they don't feel like they are being recognized and their voice doesn't count. And that is, again, the cultural capital perspective of this. And so the community environment is restricting the growth of these entrepreneurs and actually making it risky for them to actually lose their job in the future or fail in their jobs without intervention.
And one of our future goals, and something we're, as a team, I feel like we are looking to implement into this research in the future, is creating that network of African-American business owners, specifically within communities, and creating a networking platform for participants to familiarize themselves with other Black business owners within their target area or even outside of it. I know personally, with having African-American business owners in my circle, that I can have a friend that that owns a business on the west side of Green Bay, and that, whatever his business may be, it may have super similar interests as someone else I may know, but they don't know of each other and how they can collaborate and create a more positive or more vibrant community for each other to continue to uplift, Black youth, and creating processes and ways for them to understand, this is how you create your business, or these are the challenges you're going to be facing. So again, that's something I know that we've been working on, and I think it's definitely needs to be done other places as well for different communities.
So one impact that we did not put officially on a slide is that Rejan is probably now the most networked Black business owner in the state of Wisconsin, having had in-depth conversations with more than 70 people at this point. And we use that to our advantage, again, in the spirit of building relationships with this group of business owners and Extension and FIT Oshkosh. In August 2019, when he had finished the interviews, we asked him to invite the research participants to a celebration event, and also invited Extension administrators to come to that. Since this had been Dean's money that was funding it, we wanted him to see the fruits of his award. And that was right in the heart of that participatory research space that Angie talked to us about. Only 8 or so of the participants came, but those 8 were engaged. And so it's not, I don't want to say only, because all of these folks are running businesses and we had just heard all summer long how busy they were, but the 8 that came really laid it out and told us, honestly, if this is all you're doing, we don't need you anymore. What we need is money. And they were very clear. They looked at all of our administrators directly in the eye and told them that. And that was so important to us because I knew, well, to me personally, I knew that if they weren't taking us seriously, they wouldn't have come at all. And if they weren't taking us seriously, they wouldn't have been that honest. So it was a shocker for some of our admin people to hear that bluntness, but also very good for them to experience that too and to see what this really looks like. It's hard when a university is trying to undo 100 years, more than 100 years of oppression. I think it's okay for us to listen to some firm voices saying, hey, you haven't done anything for us lately. And, you know, this is fun, but what's next? Because my business. And they really, really laid that out for us. So that was a huge honor to be a part of that meeting. And like Rajan said, more plans to grow the networking there too. And so then right along the same time, within Extension, we were able to form the Entrepreneurs of Color Support Team, which again was funded by our Community Development Institute. So apart from this one grant, we now have a budget to continue pursuing these kinds of efforts around the state. And then Angie here got 2 more Dean's grants to fund the research in Milwaukee to continue this effort. So that's really been tremendous. And then FIT Oshkosh dissolved as of April 2020. The pandemic was really just too much for the kind of work that they did. So our coworker Mia, who has a community development role in 2 of the counties that we work, has really taken a lead organizing role to make sure that that People of Color Business Association doesn't disappear. So it's been renamed the Color Bold Business Association. The Color Bold Committee works with Mia to plan events and activities. She does interviews with business owners, has lots of educational formats, things. And prior to the pandemic, she and Tracy got a grant to do a co-working space. So that was open 2 or 3 times a week and people were coming, they were driving a good hour to come from Green Bay and Fond du Lac to join up at a basement in Oshkosh to work together, just to be together and to feel that solidarity. One of the best events, I think, was when a credit union representative came for the day and just hung out, like he worked there too. And later he was able to give a loan over the phone to someone he had met there. You know, I think she had to sign something, but he was able to do it so quickly, so smoothly. And she told me later, like, what a gift that had been. And if they hadn't come together at the co-working space, that never would have happened. So really a lot of benefit has happened through just that aspect alone, just getting a better handle on who are we. There wasn't really a we are us feeling. And now there is a little bit through the Color Bold group that's gonna maybe be at NACDEP next year. We'll see.
And I think the awareness too, Diana, I know you try to do this very quickly because they wouldn't have time, but the awareness that, you know, many interviews that you did with the media and knowing that, you know, I remember one specific media that say, we didn't know that we would have, you know, like 4 to 8 black business in this place. We've never seen them before. And so the awareness, you know, the assumption is always that people are good, people want to help, but how do you create that bridging social capital so that that cultural capital can be enriched and the barriers are broken? That's the thing. And so something like co-spacing, that's the best way to actually bring people together and kind of, you know, get exposed and know that, you know, we are people and we can do something together. We can trust each other or something like that. So a lot of things that you have done that I'm sure we can finish talking about that here.
So I'm excited to talk with you about what part of what's next. This is one of the first presentations that we've been able to talk fully about not only the great impact and progress of the interviews and the research in Northeastern Wisconsin, but also about this expansion to Milwaukee. And we're so excited that Rajan has just completed 22 of planned 27 interviews with a core network that I've been working with for the past 4 years in community-based research and extension. And we're expanding. So we're going to walk you through a little bit of how we're expanding here. So we can address some of the things that you've talked about in the chat and brought up in the chat. And thank you for your great comments. So what we're doing is we were approved to pursue and develop a 3 to 5 year full core sustained program in Milwaukee County based on this research initiative. So with the completion of the 22 to interviews with the Milwaukee entrepreneurs, we're mapping their network. So we ask them a specific question of who are 3 individuals in their contact information. Of who's specifically supported your business growth and success. And we're connecting that to a network survey of their social capital and their business performance characteristics. So we also adapted the interview research protocol, not to ask them specifically about PPP, but we did ask them specifically about their resilience and recovery from COVID as well. So we've got a little extra information to work with. And we're just getting started with that network survey now. So we also just won, as of May 1st, a grant, an equitable economic opportunity grant from the Greater Milwaukee Foundation for $35,000 for this program for the next year. So in addition to our Dean's funds that we have a solid foundation where I'll talk a little bit about how we're using those funds. But part of that also is we're planning to do a podcast series coordinated by one of the participating entrepreneurs who owns a podcasting business. And we'll invite the Northeastern Wisconsin participants to talk with the appropriate Milwaukee participants on several of the research themes and topics in the podcast series, and share that through a Facebook page that includes a private Facebook group, which was Rejan's suggestion to continue to have the entrepreneurs connect and build that peer networking support with each other. So he'll be participating along with them in our data walk that we're going to do also with them as we finish the analysis of the interview to network research and looking at that. And then our community partner, who I'll tell you a bit about in a second, she has an existing community education course based on a certain popular education model that we're going to be connected to. So we'll be having this course where the participating entrepreneurs can learn and apply about the research in the course, but we're teaching the entrepreneurs also how to use the internet space as a digital platform for ongoing revenue for their business. Lastly, statewide extension in Wisconsin has a 2-year certification with Growth Wheel, the business growth toolkit program. So we'll be piloting specifically some coaching and support with the Milwaukee entrepreneurs in particular, just to see how we can build that, because we have limited capacity and we want to focus our capacity in partnership with some of the economic development professionals that we're partnering with statewide, like our small business development centers, for example. Lastly, Rejan also suggested that we have a conference just for the participants. So building from what we learned in August 2019, but doing something like we like to do in Milwaukee, which we also call Small Milwaukee because everybody knows each other, something that's more than a mixer. So I'm probably going to call it that. We'll see. I kind of like that. But giving them the opportunity to come together, not just to do this, but to really engage on those areas that are significant to them. So we can go to the next slide. This is my partner from the Milwaukee area. She happens to be our statewide Wisconsin Poet Laureate. She's the first African-American woman to hold that position in 20 years. And again, like I said, we've been partnering with her and her work across these 3 areas that she's engaged for the past 4 years. Stillwaters Collective is her nonprofit that she founded 20 years ago. Dasha is a creative writer by trade and education, but she's also adjunct faculty in arts and social entrepreneurship with several colleges in the Milwaukee area. And she has her own business, The Retreat, that was a co-working space, but now is an online coaching and educational platform that she and her husband, Kima, co-manage. She's also a member of a statewide, well, it's regional and going statewide, network that you can look up, ruralurbanflow.org, of creative and agricultural entrepreneurs that have come together to do participant-led and network-based support for entrepreneurs. So she's an incredible partner And we're looking at how her influence and connection can exemplify and also connect to this research. We can go to the next slide. So this is our timeline for the Milwaukee Research Program. Again, Rajan just completed the interviews last month. Our network survey, the physical survey that will be going via paper and email to participants will happen through June, maybe July. And then we'll be starting the podcast series as that's happening, and the data walk in the folk school. Lastly, I've been in this field of community development for, I think this is my 28th year. And I started in neighborhood and revitalization engagement and learned early on that community members are asked not just by one institution, but by multiple partners within an institution or organization or an agency to do programming and be involved. But this level of collaboration requires that much more investment from them. And so incentivizing participants has been something that we've talked about in community engaged scholarship and higher education for 20 years now. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of this team of people who are actualizing meaningful compensation and just compensation for not just their participation in research and facilitating that perpetuation of extraction and exploitation from colleges and universities, including extension, but being a part of the progressive change and a part of the just and equitable change that is actualizing true inclusivity that includes just compensation. So they're not just at the table, but they're also building the table in Wisconsin Extension and a part of that and working with us to build this, not just for African Americans, but for BIPOC and other entrepreneurs across our state. Beyond that, I think I mentioned the others, and we can go to the next slide. We were going to do breakouts, and we know we have 10 minutes left in our time together, but we thought it was valuable and important that we had this time to share with you the full depth and breadth of what this team has done in the past just few years, as well as the direction and the vision for where we're going to go with these group of people and these group of partners. You're going to see us this year at several other conferences nationally, and we're really looking forward to having you have the opportunity to share, while this may be new to you in your state, especially in your role in extension, depending on where you are in your program area, you also may have been on this journey similar to us for many years now, and be really excited, just as we are, to hear our progress. We'd like to hear from you, and please contact us about these questions and these next two slides where we have the opportunity to give you the chance to kind of reflect on what you heard today. And given the time, we've got 9 minutes left. I think, team, what do you think we should do now? I just looked at the chat. Okay, why don't we go ahead and open it up to Q&A, because there's been so many great questions in the chat that the team can look over, but we'd be happy to talk with you and answer any questions that you have. And thank you so much for making the time to come in and hear from us today.
Hey, Angie. There was a question earlier on from Michael Wilcox that I wanted to answer. Specifically, he said, how did you develop your list frame? We've had trouble trying to find minority business owners. Again, I reiterate from before, our thought process was to hire someone from the community to conduct these interviews and, get the research done. I think personally, how we started was I had my own circle of people that I knew of that were, entrepreneurs or business owners, the people Diana knew at that time from the community, and then the group of people that Tracy knew as well. And we just kind of pinballed off of each other and went with those people first. And then at the end of each interview, we asked, is there anyone else that you feel could benefit from this type of research or being involved in our research? And honestly, it just kept, people had other people that they knew of, and they told us because the feeling of comfort, like being comfortable and like believing that our actual goal and objective is to, you know, help build resources, access whatever. Again, it was more just like I think it's what you call it, a pinball thing. You know, you ask one person from your circle, and just by us having 3 people initially, we use those initial people to help us continue to expand.
There was another question, Rajan, about how you introduced yourself. Did you tell them you were working for the university right off the bat, or FIT Oshkosh?
So how I introduce myself is I try to stay. I think what I've learned is we had 3 practice interviews in Milwaukee actually before we actually started the Northeastern Wisconsin project. And I was able to get a better feeling of how I was going to do that. And again, Diana mentioned earlier, just by us being able to meet each week and then go over the ones that we did in the prior weeks, I learned that, hey, like, instead of doing this, you're getting more, you know, positive feedback from just being yourself and being honest, just talking the way you talk, you know, and just communicating with these people. So I started doing that. So I started introducing myself as just me. So I just said, yeah, I'm a student at Oshkosh at the time, and I'm working for FIT Oshkosh, and this is our mission. Yeah, that's really what it was. It's like, this is our mission. And I also told people to be as transparent as possible. If you're not transparent and actually, you know, answering the questions as deep as possible and taking it to whatever perspective you may take it to, then our jobs are not, you know, what we're trying to do is not going to be done correctly. So I think by just saying that early on, it's like, hey, like, just say whatever you want to say, you know. There's a confidentiality thing here. No one's going to know. It's not going to hurt you in any kind of way. I think that was a big thing too. You know, it's not going to hurt you in any kind of way to say how you feel and what you're feeling and what you need help with. So bringing that up early on, I saw there was success there as well.
And so Diana and I and Angie too, we listened to this interview. So we, you know, that it's very, very interesting that the, you know, appreciation of having a young Black researcher trying to understand the situation of Black entrepreneurs. Actually, some of the participants actually mentioned that it's amazing that you are a young Black researcher talking with us about this. And there was also this feeling of, you know, being exploited that Angie mentioned before, that people come here, they extract this information, they you know, they promote themselves, you know, academically, and we don't get anything. So there was a lot of question about, okay, what are you going to do with this information? And Rajan would say this information would be used really to design an educational a support system for you. So we actually listened to all the tape, and from when he started the interview, he would introduce himself, would listen to that. And like you said, we would always listen, you know, the first few interviews, we were on it. We listen all the time to see where you need to probe, and if there's something coming out that's new and how to share things like that. And after 6-7 interviews, Rajan was way better than me when I was doing my dissertation research. So one thing about hiring somebody from the target population, or the people that you're going to be interviewing, in this case, African American, is not something that is easy to tell to your institution that we're going to hire someone from this you know, from this population, because that would be unacceptable. You know, you have to make it for everyone. So Diana and myself actually struggle a lot with that after we frame our you know master degree and all that, or experience in research. Then Tracy said this is the same thing that is being done over and over again to exclude minority population. So we don't want this. And so it was easier for us to just, you know, back ourselves off this one and let us do it our own way. But I think there has to be some way in our institution to find a way to say, this is really very important. I don't think that I would do this research with this result. If Rajan did do it, I don't know who else would do it to get that information, because the information relay were really, really very specific and with emotion and everything. I think there's a room for that dialogue. That in some cases, we may be more selective about who to hire. And also because it's not only research, but also it's an outreach. We want to be able to use that relationship and actually work with the population and make change.
Right. We have 2 minutes left, and Michael just asked a really great question to end on. So, Rajan, I don't know if you saw that, but what are your career aspirations?
Wow. I guess that's a really broad question for me, because I feel like I do so many different things, but I've also learned specifically with this project and some other people who are connected to this project that, I'm an MSW student. I've done a lot of work with after school programming, youth development in that area. And now we're moving a lot to the macro, work with community development and stuff like that. But I also am very into real estate, and I do, doing that. So where that all intertwines, where I've learned is low income housing, and how I can focus there and try to figure out how to create more communities where low income community members can afford, good housing and for their families and for themselves because I know, with more stable homes creates more stable families and, futures and things of that sort. So I feel like I'm leaning in a lot of ways that way, but I also know who I am and what I do. I change a lot because a lot of stuff comes my way, and I really just am learning as I go what my career aspirations are. I try to not to limit to one thing and really just continue to grow year by year.
It's such a pleasure to have been able to talk with you all today. I think everyone should have gotten access to the presentation, but thank you again so much for joining us, and please reach out to us. We look forward to talking with you.
Right. We couldn't get all the questions, but apologies. It's a lot of interesting things that